8 hours after I died for 3 minutes, I left the hospital against hospital wishes. I scooped up my clothing that had glass falling out of it, barefoot in a hospital gown, and I stumbled down the hospital hallway. I remember reaching the main level of the hospital and looking around and realizing I didn't have a car and I didn't have a phone that was working. It was broken. So I hobbled over to the station in the center of the welcome area, and I asked the woman at the desk to use the phone. She let me. I called a yellow cab, and I was shaking, trembling, because I was coming down off of drugs and alcohol. I went through the sliding glass doors, barely holding on. The only thing holding my head up was a neck brace that they had given me. I had snapped my wingtip vertebrae, and so my head was just like a noodle, like a wet noodle. I couldn't hold it up. And I waited for the cab. I remember the California sun hitting me, and it didn't matter. Nothing mattered in that moment. All I could see was a path to more booze. That was all that I wanted. So I waited there, and the cab driver pulled up, and he looked shocked. And I remember stepping into the cab and some glass falling out of my clothes onto the seat, and I said, "Oh, sorry." And he looked at me in the rearview mirror, and he said, "What happened to you?" And I looked at him dead in the eyes, and I said, "Life." And then I said, "Take me to the nearest liquor store." So he did. And I remember just trying to get out of the cab was almost impossible. I remember as we were driving, I was holding my neck because every time he would stop, I felt like pain was just shooting through my body. And we reached the liquor store, which was right around the corner from the hotel I was staying at. I was at a Residence Inn. It was old. It was like a 70s style Residence Inn, and I'd been there for a couple of months during my separation from my wife at the time. And I went into this liquor store, and the people's mouths dropped that were behind the counter. They just looked at me like, what is going on? My butt was exposed. I mean, it's really unbelievable. I was covered in blood. I had 25 staples in my forehead. I looked like something out of a B horror movie. And I went to the nearest bottle of liquor I could find. It's a bottle of bottom shelf whiskey. Took it to the counter, pulled out my wallet, and as I pulled out my wallet, I looked up and I could see the security camera that was capturing me, and I just couldn't believe it. It was unreal. Even I thought this should be in a movie, and glass fell out of my wallet, and I paid, took the bottle, got back to the hotel room, shut the door. Blinds were already drawn. They had been for days. And I sat down on the edge of the bed very slowly, opened the bottle of liquor, and proceeded to drink as much as I possibly could. I eventually laid down, passed out, and was hoping that I wouldn't wake up. The hospital told me that if you drink right now, when you leave, you could die. You have blood clotting most likely, and the last thing you want to do is drink. But I wasn't hearing that. So I laid there, passed out, and sure enough, I heard a leaf blower. It was morning. Men were outside working. And when my eyes opened, everything that had happened the night before flooded back in. I remembered that I had flipped a car 6 times. I didn't know if people were injured. I knew that I had made bail, which meant nobody died. But what a moment it was to wake up and realize that your life has completely changed. I was stuck to the bed. The sheets had dried blood on them. I had bled out from every cut that I had. My face was covered in blood, and the sheets had dried. The blood had dried onto the sheets, onto my skin, and I had to slowly make my way off the bed in pain, hit my knees, and pull the sheets from my body. I remember stumbling down the hall in that Residence Inn, still dark with the shades drawn, flipped on the light and it flickered. And I looked at myself in the mirror when the lights came on, and I didn't recognize myself. I didn't know who I was. I was shocked at my own visual image. It was frightening. And I remember hitting my knees. I was able to get to my knees in the pain that I was in, and I cried out. For the first time in my life, a true cry of, God, if you're real, I need help. Please. I don't know what I've done. I don't know who I am. I'm completely lost. If you're real, if you're really out there, please. Now is the time. And so many of us do that when we're in the most pain of our lives. You know, we cry out to something bigger than ourselves because our lives are totally out of control. And I sat there for a moment, sobbing like a baby. And the phone rang. The actual landline of the hotel rang like a massive buzzer in my head. And it was awful. The sound was just terrible. And it kept going. It didn't stop. So I had to peel myself up off that floor, make my way back down the hall, stumbling, and pick up the phone. And it was my ex-mother-in-law, which was the last person I want to talk to, right? At the time, she was still my mother-in-law, but thankfully, now ex-mother-in-law. And she gave me a hard time. She told me what a loser I was, what a degenerate I was, how her daughter would never come back to me after this. And mind you, this is a woman who is talking about a daughter who's had an affair and brought alcohol back into our house, but I don't want to digress too much and focus on that. It was a terrible time in my life. And I hung up the phone, and I ripped it off as much as I could. I ripped it. I pulled it. I was angry. And then the pain shot through my body, and the drawer opened up, and there was a Bible sitting right there. No, I didn't pick it up.